Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Sisak Municipal Museum in Sisak, Croatia, taking a look at what is clearly the most bonkers, crazy Croatian firearm to come out of the Homeland War. In fact, I think there's a pretty good argument to be made for this being the most bonkers weapon to come out of the Balkan Wars all in general. This is the Kresimir. It is named after a historic Croatian king, and it is a semi-automatic hand grenade launcher. Not rifle grenades, not a mortar. This holds a magazine of 5 live hand grenades and has a little small magazine of 5 blank firing, well, grenade launching blank AK cartridges, and it is a long action semi-automatic grenade launcher. It is nuts. Let's go ahead and take a closer look, and let me show you how this thing actually works. Okay, here you go up close. There are a couple of major elements. This was intended to be fired from the shoulder, although the limited extent to which these were actually used probably involved a lot of firing from the hip because the recoil from this thing is going to be significant. Pistol grip trigger, obviously. This is the magazine for the grenades. This is the magazine for the blank firing cartridges. And then this is our charging handle, because the weight of the bolt and the compression of the recoil spring in here are such that you're not using just a straight charging handle. You need some mechanical advantage. And frankly, this actually makes it really easy to cycle this thing. Let's start with a closer look at the magazines. Grenade launcher first. I've got a release catch here. Push it in. I can lift this out. And then there are 2 large lugs here on the front, which lock into these 2 supports on the front of the gun. Inside the magazine, we have a giant spring and a follower lever here, and this shape is pretty much the outline of the hand grenades that were used. This was specifically the M50 hand grenade, and that came in 2 versions. One had a traditional spoon, like you'd expect, and one actually had an impact fuse. The idea being you had a little sort of primer-like protrusion on the front of the grenade, and you would strike it on a hard object, and that would start the approximately 5-second fuse of the grenade. So it is specifically those impact fused grenades that were used here. So they don't detonate on impact. The firing mechanism actually starts the fuse on the grenade and then launches it out of the barrel. We'll get to that in a moment. We have a round counter on the side here, so as I push this lever up, it's going to indicate how many grenades are left in the system, and there is a manual lock here on the side. So the way you would load this thing is to open the lock, cram 5 live hand grenades into it with any and all safety pins removed, and then engage that lock on top so that you don't have all 5 grenades go kawoing out of the thing. In this way, it's kind of like, if you remember way back, it's kind of like the British Farquhar Hill magazine design. Next up, we have a magazine for the blank launching cartridges. Got a lever here, push that down, and I can pull that out. That's a 5-round, essentially a standard AK magazine, just cut down to 5 rounds to match your 5 grenades. And now that I have all of those out of the way, I can actually cycle the action for you. So it is simple blowback, but long, sort of simple blowback, but long recoil. Imagine a long recoil system without a locking lug mechanism. So our charging handle has a crescent shape here that hooks onto this peg, and I can then, on the outside of my tripod, pull the whole barrel back, and then the barrel reciprocates. So now I have the bolt locked open. We have a safety lever here that is preventing grenades in the magazine from just dumping down into the action. So in order to release this, what you have to do is pull this out and then basically just give the barrel a little push or use the charging handle. It's the equivalent of having a bolt locked open. You pull the bolt slightly back to release the bolt lock, and then it slams forward. However, while this is open, I can show you an interesting element. You can see right down in there, there's like a 2-part hole in the front of the bolt face. That is to hold, to house the impact fuse of the grenade, And that center hole actually has, basically there's a striker inside the bolt mechanism here, that when you pull the trigger, it first strikes the grenade fuse, which starts the roughly 5-second timed fuse on the grenade, and then it drops a second striker that fires, I already took the magazine out, fires one of our 7.62x39 blank cartridges to propel the grenade. So in theory, the grenades in the magazine are safe because their primers haven't been touched until the moment of firing. Of course, this does mean that if you have a dud blank cartridge, you're in serious trouble. The sights here are graduated from 150 out to 500 meters. It's not entirely clear to me if the front sight is meant to be elevated or down. Down kind of seems like the more appropriate position, but I'm not sure then why it would elevate. I've now closed the bolt, and you can see that the AK magazine sits right there. Now, unfortunately, this is missing a major component. I suspect that was removed to essentially deactivate it. But we have our magazine down here, and you can see that's the top of the follower right there. And there's a chamber right there in the back of the bolt assembly. And so your blank rounds would be fed from the magazine up into that chamber and then fired. However, essentially the mini bolt, like the inner bolt that does that, is not present on this gun. So I can't show you that, like the whole mechanical function, but when you cycle the bolt, it would normally run a blank round from the magazine up into there before firing. That said, when I pulled the trigger, you can hear two distinctive strikers dropping. The first will be the one that initiates the grenade, and the second will be firing. So that's the grenade, that's the striker for the cartridge. And if I pull the trigger again, it will continue to restrike the cartridge, but it doesn't restrike the grenade until the whole system has been cycled. Now we also have this distinctive structure on the back end of the gun. That is basically just a sheet metal shell, because the magazine here is going to cycle backward when the gun cycles, like so. And you don't want this to get caught on some part of the shooter or their gear. It could frankly hurt you. I think just about everything on this device could hurt you, but it could also interfere with the gun's functioning. So there's a protective shield on there, kind of like you see on some of the really early bolt action to semi-auto conversions. So there you go. There is the Kresimir, the craziest grenade launching mechanism I have yet seen, and one that actually saw service in the Homeland War. I have reports from more than one person on them actually being used in combat. Now, how many people used one of these things more than once in a row? Well, that's debatable. That's an interesting question. But man, these things are cool. Unfortunately, we don't know how many of these were actually made. We do know that they were made by IM Metall. This was, I believe, actually their very first weapons-related product. IM Metall, of course, later became HS Product, best known today for producing the XD series of pistols that are quite popular in the US. But this thing is where they actually got their start in weapons during the Homeland War. So I'd like to give a big thanks to the CSOC Municipal Museum for giving me access to this to film. We actually saw one of these at the Croatian Police Museum, but it was missing its magazine, and I really wanted to get the whole enchilada for you guys to see. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. To be honest, if you didn't enjoy this one, I'm not sure what on earth I could do for you. So thanks for watching.